task. Give me a second, little second. There you are. Fantastic. Okay, dear students, thank you very much then. As I was mentioning, today we're going to practice and we're going to have all the theoretical aspects of the third task of the speaking section. And as I told you, well, I know that this is not going to be a huge problem for you because I have seen what you can do, all right? But anyways, let us discuss the third task, beginning, of course, with the structure, how you have to perform it, what is said, first of all, of course, we're going to have all that information and discussion. So let's start with our excursus, and here you have the presentation. All right. So if you look at my screen, you're going to notice something. This is called the task number 3 of the speaking section, but nonetheless, the title as such is exactly the same one. Judging it or comparing it to the second one is called integrated speaking task. Why is that? Remember that when we were discussing the general aspects of the reading section, I told you that this section, although it has 4 different tasks, it merely has 2 different types of questions. The first type of question is called independent question. That is the one that we have seen only applies for the first task of the speaking section. You remember that in that question, you were asked to give your opinion, your data, your information, your knowledge, and therefore you were independent. You were the ones offering and, let's say, providing information for your response. Nonetheless, we have also seen the second task of the speaking section. And in that task, the second type of question came to our perspective as well, or to our perception, because the second type of question in this exam is called integrated question. And the reason why it's called like that is, first of all, because in this case, you are not independent anymore. The integrated questions of this exam basically ask you to remain as a neutral observer in these exercises, and to be somebody who, well, merely receives information and summarizes it, no more than that. Apart from that, well, you have to, of course, listen, read, and then you have to offer a summary of both information sources. And that is exactly what we did in the second task that we were practicing yesterday and very much successfully, have to add. So for tonight's class, we're going to be discussing the third task of the speaking section. And as I say, this is also an integrated question. Therefore, the mechanism, how this question is designed, how you're going to be evaluated is exactly the same. You're going to be receiving 2 different information sources that you're going to have to summarize. Now, actually, even the, let's say, the nature or the composition of these information sources is exactly the same. You're going to receive, first of all, a reading passage, and then you're going to receive a audio, or let's say a listening passage. But now, the only thing that varies here, and the only difference that, of course, is substantial, and I would say, well, this is different from the second task, is that in this case, our information sources, our materials, are not going to be about trivial topics as the ones that we were discussing until this point. Because remember, for example, last time we just talked about, or we read and listened about things happening in a university, how they wanted to change this program, how they wanted to create this activity, the scholarships they were offering, and we listened to 2 students discussing that particular topic. Now, this is going to change. In the third task, the reading passage and the listening passage, we are going to receive as material and information sources for our responses are not going to discuss such trivial topics. No. We're going to be receiving information about academic topics. That's the reason why if you read, it says the third task will deal with academics. We're coming back to academics. I think that we have had a very good, let's say, time discussing, well, merely, let's say, personal, or, well, how could I say it? Let's say, well, I don't want to say relevant, but if you think about it, of course, when you're talking about things happening in a university, they're not that important, right? And they're not that serious, let's say. Now we are coming back to very serious things because we're going to be reading and listening about academics. And just as it happened also, of course, in many questions in the TOEFL exam, this is going to discuss academics, all right? Now, something also very important. You will be reading a short passage that is 80 to 100 words long, and this will be discussing an academic topic. As I say, and what do I mean, by the way, by an academic topic? By an academic topic, I simply mean any particular subject or discipline that could be taught in a university. That is to say, physics, chemistry, mathematics, well, literature, languages, medicine, nutrition, anything that you can think of, and imagine that it could possibly, it could possibly be taught in a university. That is something that you're going to receive in this task. As I say, okay, you have a huge spectrum of different subjects and topics, okay? Now, so after you receive this reading passage that, as I say, could be discussing any particular academic subject, you're going to be listening, as I told you, an audio. And now here the audio also varies in its composition. The audio is not going to be about two persons discussing that particular topic anymore. You're not going to be, for example, receiving, I don't know, the students' opinions on these topics. You're not going to listen to people saying, hey, I don't like mathematics. Oh, me too, right? I mean, that is not going to happen in this case. What is going to happen is that you're going to be listening to a professor, okay, to an actual professor, discussing this subject on a class. That is to say, you're going to listen to a lecture, to a class on the same topic you have read about. For example, imagine that in the, let's say, in the reading passage, you have read about Darwin's evolutionary theory. Therefore, if you have read about Darwin's evolutionary theory, that of course is a subject that could possibly appear on the exam because it's related to biology or to chemistry, right? And therefore, it is an academic subject that could appear on this part. You're later going to listen to a lecture on the same topic. That is to say, you're going to listen to a professor discussing Darwin's evolutionary theory. As you can see, that particular characteristic also remains and continues from the second task, because also in the second task, when we were reading, let's say, something related to a change in a bus service, then the students also were discussing that topic, right? So there was a continuity between the reading passage and also the listening passage, and that continuity remains here. That is maintained. That is to say, if the reading passage is about, let's say, I don't know, any topic like the invention of printing, then the professor you're going to listen to in the listening passage is also going to be talking about the invention of printing, right? So as you can see, that remains. Now, the second information source that I mentioned is going to be, as I say, a lecturer that will be giving you a few examples that complement the topic of the passage. This is very interesting. Normally here, the professor, what he does is to complement. Of course, sometimes he's going to offer some different ideas, but what he does is also to complement the reading passage. Anyways, what you have to remember and to have in mind while always performing this task is that he's going to discuss the same topic. Doesn't matter what he does with it, if he complements it, if he argues against the reading passage, the point is that they are always going to be discussing the same topic you have read about, okay? And here what you have to do is to summarize both items. As I told you, look at the picture that I have here on my screen. It's exactly the same one that we had for the second task. And why? Because I also want you to identify this task with the role of a journalist. Please always remind that in this case, you don't have to offer your opinion. And let me tell you here, dear students, that you are going to be even more tempted, okay? More tempted to give your opinion while responding in this task. Why? Because many of you are studying in the university and many of you are actually already professionals. Therefore, when you're a professional, you have a lot of knowledge and information about different topics, right? And imagine, for example, you are a professional in the area of, I don't know, physics, and your reading passage and lecture are exactly about physics. That is to say, I don't know, they are discussing, I don't know, dynamics or Newton's laws, I don't know, reaction, I don't know, whatever. The point is that if it is talking about physics and you are an expert on physics, you're going to be tempted to say, oh, but I could add here some information, right, that is lacking, in my opinion, to the reading passage. Or it could also happen alternatively, that if you are very much knowledgeable on a particular subject, like physics, for example, you're going to discover that maybe ETS gives you wrong information. For example, maybe they say that Newton just proposed two laws of dynamics and movement. Nonetheless, if you know that that is true, okay, excuse me, that is false, that Newton actually proposed three different laws of dynamics and movement, then what you're going to do is you are not going to contradict that, okay? I'm so sorry, but this is not a moment for you to debate. Remember that the moment for you to debate was when we were discussing the first task of the speaking section. Now we are being journalists, and journalists do not get into the fight. They simply limit themselves to inform people, and that is exactly what you're going to do. You're going to inform your reviewer about what the information sources tell you. As I say, please avoid, even if you see that some information you are aware of is incorrect, is simply erroneous, it's not a good time for you to mention or to clarify anything. As I say, if you know that Newton actually proposed 3 laws of dynamics and ETS gives you a passage that says that he invented just 2, well, don't say it. Simply limit yourself to summarize the passage just as they give it to you, all right? As I say, don't include the information, limit yourself to transmit the information just as they present it to you, even if it is erroneous. But I mean, that is sad, of course, but even if it is erroneous, you have to transmit it just as you receive it, all right? And let us now examine the timing we're going to have for this particular task, all right? The timing doesn't vary, by the way. As you can see, you're going to have 45 seconds in order to read your passage about an academic subject. Then you're going to have 1 minute to listen to the lecture. But of course, it's not going to be exceeding that time. 1 minute and a half, 1 minute and 45 seconds, no more than that. That is not going to change very much. 30 seconds to prepare your response. As you can see, exactly the same time you had in the second task. And finally, 60 seconds to deliver your response. Well, I think it's quite similar, right? Exactly 1 minute in order to respond. All right, so here you have the timing. As you can see, doesn't vary from the second task. Fantastic. So let us now listen and, of course, read together some examples. I know that through the illustrations, you're going to get this topic way better, okay? So just as we did with the second task, let me offer you some illustrations, okay, of this task. Let me open here this window. Here, prepare, I have my first reading passage, okay? So first of all, let us read the title. As you can see, it says, what is mitosis? And I think that by the same title, you can notice that there is a difference. They are not discussing now a new activity in the university, or I don't know, a new change, a new schedule, a policy. No, they are discussing now serious matters. What is mitosis, right? The word itself seems to be very much threatening, mitosis, right? And I say in advance that you're going to find that here the complexity of the reading passage, and here, of course, of the conversation, well, the lecture in this case, right, augments a little bit. That is to say, you're going to find it a little bit more difficult, at least with regard to this. How to respond is exactly the same, but the complexity, of course, increases because we're now discussing academics, right? So as you can see, what is mitosis, right? That is the topic. Now, we're going to read this together. I'm going to read it aloud, okay, for you to listen and to read with me. And as you can see, with regard to the, well, to the length of the passage, is no more than 100 words, just as it happened also in the first, or in the second task, excuse me. So let us read together what it says about mitosis. In biology, the process called mitosis is a part of the cell cycle in which chromosomes are replicated and separated into 2 nuclei. This is a process that only occurs in certain type of cells called eukaryotic cells. Most animals undergo this type of mitosis, although the process can vary between one animal and the next. Errors sometimes occur during this process, which is how many forms of cancer come to be. These are typically caused by having too few or too many chromosomes in the duplicated cells. Some organisms also use mitosis as a form of reproduction. There you are. So, well, this is the passage. As you can see, with regard to the length of the passage, not very much large. I think that the 45 seconds are still going to be sufficient for you to read this very comfortably. Now, of course, as you can see, let's say the wording of the passage, the vocabulary, the grammar is a little bit more fancy. It's the type of material you would read if you were studying in a university in America, Europe, etc. Right? But nonetheless, you can manage it. I know of your capacities, so I'm very much confident and let's say optimistic that you're going to find this very much easy. All right. So there you have it. And now, after you read this, remember that you have 4 or 5 seconds. You're going to be listening to a lecture, as I say, a class of an actual chemistry professor or biology professor discussing this. All right. So please, if you have a piece of paper nearby you, grab it, and also please grab your pencil and please take notes so that we can compare our responses later, right? So let us start with this. Please, dear students, let us start listening to this lecture on mitosis.
Now listen to a lecture on the same topic.
Okay, so mitosis. Many of you might be wondering how this applies in the real world. Take the example of a cut on your finger. Why doesn't the cut stay open forever? Well, because the cells in your finger undergo mitosis. The body uses this process to repair damage and replace dead cells. It's not always a fast process. The cut on your hand will usually take several days to heal completely. The process of mitosis is at its most rapid when we're in our infancy. It has to be this way. Human beings grow rapidly during this time, so they need a lot of new cells to replace the ones which die and help the baby boy or girl to grow. Other animal species, such as the dog, undergo this process even more rapidly. Ever noticed how a puppy the size of your hand is the size of a small horse 18 months later? Well, the process which enables this rapid transition is mitosis too. Another and very different example of mitosis is that of bacteria. Most bacteria are asexual by nature, that is, they do not require a partner to reproduce. They use mitosis in order to churn out exact copies of themselves. Some bacteria, such as the one called Salmonella, can reproduce once every 20 minutes.
All right, fantastic. So we have listened to this lecture, and that will be all. That is all the information we'll receive. That is all the content we're going to be, well, let's say, examining or analyzing before responding to the question, right? So after you listen to this, as I say, there's going to be a voice in your headphones that will say, now that you have listened to your passage, please start preparing your response after the beep. And there's going to be a sound like beep, right? And then the 30 seconds you're going to have, well, we'll start counting down, right? So, well, imagine that it has, imagine that that has already happened and that I have prepared my response. I use my 30 seconds. Fantastic. Now let's listen to my response, all right? So notice, please, that in my response, I'm going to speak one more time for 1 minute, no more than that. And I'm going to offer my summary, remember, of the reading passage, in this case, of the lecture. You're going to notice that the structure that I use is very similar to the one that I have also offered you in the second task of the speaking section. And of course, it's similar because the question itself is similar. So there wouldn't be any necessity to vary very much, right? So as I say, it's going to be a summary of the reading passage and then a summary of the lecture. So if you're able to, please pay attention to how I start my response, the structure, or how I organize it in the middle, and how I finish it. All right, so please let's listen to how I responded to this question. Let's go. Well, it doesn't matter. We don't load. Here we have. Let's go.
Okay. In the reading passage, we have been immersed into the topic of mitosis, which is a process by which eukaryotic cells are replicated and separated into two nuclei. On the other hand, in the listening passage, we observe some practical applications of this phenomenon in the real world. For example, when we have a cut in our fingers, the way that they heal, or the way that the cut heals, is by mitosis, and the cells are reparated and the damaged ones are simply eliminated, and that way we heal. This process is also very much efficient and rapid in our infancy because we need to grow up, and it is the same case for dogs, because when they are puppies, they can grow up super fastly into a completely large animal. Also, it happens in some bacteria which are asexual and do not need partners to reproduce, as for example, Salmonella.
There you are. Fantastic. So that would be my response. If you noticed, I limit myself to merely summarize both materials. I summarized, in this case, the reading passage about mitosis, and then I offer also my summary of the lecture that we listened to. That is to say, the professor's examples, right, of mitosis. In this case, she talked about some particular examples and illustrations with, for example, puppies, with human beings, and finally with some bacteria, right? I didn't offer any external information, and please always try to replicate that, all right? Fantastic. So before we get into the template, of course, I'm going to share with you. Let us listen to one more example, and let us read as well. So let me open here this. We're going to read and listen to one more example. Okay, here we have it. Okay, let's see. So please, let us read together this new passage on compassionate consumerism. That is the topic. Okay, let's see. Right, here we have. Let's read. It says, compassionate consumerism. Compassionate consumerism is a relatively new trend in the American retail market. In this type of consumerism, when individuals make a purchase of a portion of the money they pay is allocated to a charitable cause. Nowadays, individuals often look for ways to contribute to the betterment of humanity, but they don't always have the financial resources to do so. Compassionate consumerism appears to be a good middle ground. While critics feel that it's only a marketing ploy aimed at appealing to people in their 20s and 30s, others applaud the effort. They argue that it is desirable for companies to sacrifice profits in order to help those in need. There you are. Okay, so 45 seconds to read this. Okay, fantastic. So after you read this passage, then in this case, I guess it will be part of a business class or some sort of, yes, business class, right? Or marketing related area. Then you're going to listen to a lecture on the same topic. So let us listen to that lecture together. Let's go.
Now, as the reading suggests, many companies have embraced the idea of compassionate consumerism over the past few years. Studies show that customers are generally supportive of such efforts, especially very young shoppers. Not only that, but companies make a lot of additional profits from this kind of compassionate marketing. Some companies even thrive off of it. Now, take ABC Shoes, for example. They're kind of like the pioneer of this type of consumerism. You know the shoes, right? Those flat, simple slip-on shoes which are based on a type of traditional Argentinian footwear called an alpargata. Anyway, ABC Shoes achieved a huge market share about 7 years ago with their one-for-one business model. Basically, if you buy a pair of ABC shoes, they donate another pair of shoes to an impoverished individual. While this program has cost ABC Shoes a lot of money to administer, they've also made so much profit that they've expanded to include not only shoes, but also eyewear and coffee. Speaking of coffee, another famous company that has adopted the compassionate consumerism model is Bob's Coffee. Now, the one-for-one model doesn't make much sense for a cup of coffee, but a portion of the cost of certain items is sometimes donated to various nonprofit organizations. Since Bob's deals closely with coffee bean farmers in South America, they have recently launched a campaign where 10% of all purchases are donated to preserving the South American rainforest. And, would you believe it, on the day they announced the campaign, there was a line out the door at Bob's Coffee right here on campus.
Okay, I always like and enjoy how she says, there was a line out the door, right? Very interesting accent, that one. Okay, let us continue then. So after you listen to this, as I say, the voice in your headphones will say something like, now that you have listened to this, please start preparing your response after the beep. And like, beep, right? 30 seconds. And after you finalize with those 30 seconds, then you'll start with the 1 minute of response, okay? Let us listen to how I responded. And notice, please try to identify in this case what phrases, sentences I am repeating from my first response. And if you manage to do so, you will actually come out with the structure without even myself showing it to you. Okay, so let's see. Download. Let's see.
In the reading passage, we have been immersed into the topic of compassionate consumerism, which is a phenomenon that happens when people buy things knowing that a portion of their payment will be allocated to a charitable fund. Likewise, in the listening passage, we have seen in a study that confirms that this practice and method is very much supported by young shoppers, and that it also promotes and helps enterprises to get additional profits. For example, ABC Shoes was a pioneer in this specific practice. They made some sort of shoes called alpargata. They had a one-for-one business model in which they received a purchase and they also gave away another shoes to a poor person. You also have Bob's Coffee, which basically receive a purchase and they donate one portion of that to an ONG. They are launching right now a campaign to help the South American rainforests.
There you are. Fantastic. Okay, so that would be the example, right? If you notice, well, my pattern also remain constant, and let me show it to you now, okay? So let's come back here to the presentation, and here you have the template for the third task of the speaking section. It also contains 4 different steps, and the first one basically consists in an introductory phrase that I have altered in this case. Now, as you can see, the introductory phrase is something like, in the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of, right? I repeat, in the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of, right? Instead of saying to begin with, etc. Here I have altered a little bit the introductory phrase. Of course, you can change it if you don't like it. If you find other introductory phrase to be more natural to you, please change it without any type of hesitation, all right? So in the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of, and here, for example, if you notice, it's like my introductory phrase, the one that I have chosen, somehow forces me to say the title or the overall topic of the passage. And I think that this is a very healthy practice. It is very important, I think, to mention what is that topic that both your reading passage and your listening passage discuss. So for example, if you notice, in all my illustrations, I said, in the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of mitosis, or otherwise, in the reading passage, we've been immersed in the topic, or excuse me, into the topic of compassionate consumerism. And after I mentioned the title or the overall topic, I started with my summary of the reading passage, right? So in the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of compassionate consumerism. The reading passage says that this, and this, and this, and this, and this, right? So here is where you mention, as well as I say, your summary of the reading passage. In this first step, in the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of mitosis. That is a process that describes the separation and duplication of certain cells in, certain chromosomes in the cell process, right? Something like that. So after you finalize with your summary of the reading passage, what you do is to move on to the second step. As you can see here, we have a connector. It says likewise, right? Asimismo. And likewise, you say, right? Likewise in the listening passage. And here's where you talked about what the listening passage said as well. For example, in my illustration about mitosis, I said, right? Likewise, in the listening passage, we have listened to a professor discussing the topic and giving 2 examples, right? And that is exactly what the third and the fourth step represent. If you notice, both in my first illustration and second illustration, the lectures delivered by the professors were always consisting in 2 different ideas or points and additional illustrations that the professors used in order for their students to understand the topic. For example, in the lecture about mitosis, the professor gave 2 particular ideas. That is that this process of mitosis helps some creatures and some beings to grow up and to heal. And she offers some illustrations, right? She talked about, for example, how puppies, that is to say dogs, are able to grow up super rapidly. And she also talked about, for example, how human beings also grow up tremendously fast, and how so that they heal when they make a cut in their fingers, right? And as you can see, that is just one idea, but nonetheless, she's offering some illustrations for that. And in the second lecture's point, in the illustration of mitosis, she talked about, in this case, about reproduction, right? She talked about how some cells or some bacteria, in this case, reproduce each other without having the necessity of a partner. And the way to do so is by mitosis. So she talks about one specific example. She talks about salmonella, right? So as you can see, the lectures normally have 2 points. And in this third and fourth step is where you have to summarize them, talk about them, and give, of course, as well, the illustrations that the professors are offering for those particular points. Now, of course, sometimes it could happen that the lecture will actually have more than 2 points. All right, if that is the case, then augment, of course, a third point, a fourth point, as it is necessary for you. But normally, as I say, lectures tend to have 2 or at a maximum 3 points, right? No more than that. And as I say, that is the use of the third and the fourth step for you to summarize the first lecture's point and the second lecture's point. No more than that, right? So here you have the template and the structure you are going to be also using in your responses. Do you have any questions, dear students, about how to use this template? Anything that I could clarify? Please tell me. I'm going to be super delighted to help you. Anything? Questions, your students, Anais, Sergio, Jorge, Adriana, Fabiana, any question about what we are discussing?
No questions.
All right, thank you very much.
It's
Anais.
clear.
Thank you, Jorge. What about the rest of you guys? Any question? No questions? Okay, fantastic. No questions. So before we get into the practice, because I want us to practice at least one exercise together, let me just give you some brief recommendations, okay? These recommendations are the following. Look at, for example, at my screen here. It says, for this section, and this is a recommendation that I already gave you, nonetheless, I just want to, well, to express it one more time because I think it's very, very, very important. For this section, you must be very general and concise while summarizing both materials you will receive. Nonetheless, if you're going to emphasize in one item, let it be in the listening item. Namely, spend more time summarizing the conversation you just listened to. The reason why I tell you this, dear students, is, well, exactly actually the same set of reasons I offer you in the second task. Remember that it is easier to, of course, copy on your sheet of paper what the reading passage said and just to offer it. But nonetheless, it's not that easy to do the same with the listening passage, right? And also remember that in the listening passage, in this case, the lecture, you are receiving a lot of material, way more in comparison to the reading passage. So of course, there are more things to discuss, more details, more illustrations as I am, as I'm making sure you understand. And of course, it is a very good idea to emphasize that and to spend more time discussing what has brought you more details and data to the conversation. That is, of course, what? The lecture, right? So please try to always spend more time there and to emphasize on that part. Now, thirdly, it is going to be advantageous, dear students, if you prepare your response sheet in the interlude between the second task and the third task. What I basically mean by this is, look at my picture here. Well, you have a sheet of paper, right? And as I recommended you for the second task, the good technique that I would be, of course, very glad to share with you would be when you are about to respond or at any free time you have during the exam, write down on your sheet of paper the structure you're going to follow for the response. Remember that the structure is this one. Here you have the 4 steps. And well, basically what you have to do is to copy that structure on your paper, but making sure that you leave for you some blank space for you to fill those spaces later on when you receive the information you're going to apply and include in your response. So for example, if you see the first line that I'm writing is the first step of the structure. In the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic. And as you can see, I'm leaving for you what? Some space. Because at this point, when I wrote these notes, I didn't know what my topic would be. Therefore, of course, I was not able to write down into the topic of mitosis, for example, right? But I left for you some blank space, or I left for me in this case, some blank space so that I could always fill it whenever I knew the template, right? Or excuse me, the content. As you can see, the second step is separated from my first sentence and it says likewise, right? And here I'm also leaving for you, or leaving for me, excuse me, some space for me to fill it and to complement it when I receive the content, right? So this is a very good idea, I think, to practice the exercise in this manner, because you're going to be way more organized, all right? So this will be a very good recommendation for you. Fantastic. Any questions, dear students, about anything we have discussed until this point about the third task of the speaking section? Anything that I could clarify, tell me, or we can move on directly to the practice, because I want us to practice, as I say, at least one exercise together, and I think that you're going to find it very much interesting. Questions, ideas?
It's clear so far.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jorge. What about the rest of you guys? Questions?
It's okay, thank you.
Fantastic, Adriana. Thank you very much. There you are. So I think that we can safely move on then to the practices. So please, let us get into that. We're going to practice with this material this time. Just give me here a second. Here we have. So if you look at your screen, you're going to be able to read a passage that talks about Aboriginal people. And of course, this could be a topic that you could receive in history, sociology, I don't know, any crazy thing that American universities teach. But the point is that Aboriginal people would be the topic for our first exercise, okay? So as you're going to be reading here from my screen, I'm going to take your time here through my cell phone, okay? Remember that you also have 45 seconds to read this particular passage. So I'm going to take that time here through my cell phone, all right? And when you listen to, well, to my chronometer and to my bell, then you know that, of course, your time is over, and we're going to start with the listening passage, all right? So please, all of you, look at my screen, and let us please start reading this passage now. There you are. So you can see those are your 45 seconds. Okay, so now please make sure you have a piece of paper nearby you, and also a pencil, something to write down with. And we're going to listen to the lecture on the same topic of Aboriginal people. All right, so please let us listen, and then we're going to excuse me, and then we're going to start with our round of responses. Okay, let's go.
According to your textbook, the Aboriginal people are very diverse, and I would agree with that. However, there are certain beliefs that unite the groups, and in fact allow them to identify themselves and others as members of the diverse Aboriginal societies. For one thing, unlike the anthropologists who believe that tribes arrived in eastern Australia from Tasmania about 40,000 years ago, the Aboriginal people believe that they have always been in Australia and that they have sprung from the land. Evidence for this resides in the oral history that has been recorded in stories and passed down for at least 50 generations. This history is referred to as the dreaming. The stories teach moral and spiritual values and provide each member of the group with an identity that reflects the landscape where the person's mother first becomes aware of the unborn baby, or, to put it in terms of the dreaming, where the spirit enters the mother's body. So, I am saying that the way that the Aboriginal people identify themselves and each other, even across groups, is by their membership in the oral history that they share.
There you are. This is another passage, by the way. Okay, it doesn't have to do with it. Fantastic. So now that we have read and listened, dear students, to our information sources, I think we are able to respond, right, to the question. Just give me a second. 1, 2, here. All right, fantastic. So let us start then with our 30 seconds of preparation for this question. And then we're going to start with the responses one by one, as we always do, right? So please, let's start them. I'm gonna here press my chronometer. And as you know, you have the same time you previously had in the second time, excuse me, in the second task for you to prepare your response. That is to say, 30 seconds. So please let us start and begin preparing your responses now. Awesome. All right, so let us start, okay? Who's gonna be the first one? Let me choose. Okay, so Jorge, please. You're going to help me, right, with this exercise. You will be the first student responding to this question. Okay, so please, dear Jorge, start responding to the question now.
In the reading passage, we've been immersed in the topic of Aboriginal people, their diversity, and how hard it is to actually identify and recognize that they are actually Aboriginal because they have different characteristics and different structure of body structure and languages. Likewise, the listening passages is about the difference that they have, but also how they can be or how they actually end up identifying themselves. There are different theories that although the first Aboriginal arrived to Australia through Tasmania, however, the way that they identify themselves, the Aboriginal people identify themselves, is throughout their oral history and how the membership that they have in the oral history. That'll be it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, dear Jorge. There you are. Great. So please, dear Anai, could you continue with this round? Please enable your microphone and start responding to the question now.
In the reading passage, we have been immersed into the Aboriginal people. And here it mentions that the diversity of language, cultures, customs, and even body structure. But likewise, in the listening passage, that is also talking about Aboriginal people and includes how the anthropology see this history. So Australia was the first place that began the Aboriginal membership, and until nowadays, they continue with have difference in language, cultures, customs, but they in fact they have this oral history that contains their majority of their difference between groups.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much, dear Anai. It was very good. All right, please, dear Adriana, could you follow up with this round? Please enable your microphone and start responding to the question now.
Okay, the reading passage main topic is about the Aboriginal people and the origin about Australia and how they moved around another countries. Also, it was about all the main characteristic about this kind of people and the culture and all the evolution that they have. In the listening section, it was about how was the origin and how they were developing and moving around to other landscapes.
All right. Thank you very much, dear Anai. Fantastic. Oh, excuse me, Adriana. And finally, we have Sergio. Okay, so please, dear Sergio, we're going to finalize with this round. So start responding to the question, and you have 1 minute for doing so, starting now.
Okay, the text starts speaking about the Aboriginal and how they members speak several languages, more than 200 communities they share. Aboriginal community experience they have.
All right. Great, great. Thank you very much, dear Sergio. Had some troubles when listening to you, but nonetheless, yes, I got most of your ideas. So it was very good. Thank you very much, dear Sergio. There you are. Fantastic. Okay, dear students. So I think it was very good exercise. Actually, I'm very much content. Well, I think that certainly in this case, you notice that it is a little bit more difficult to catch some details, right? Because of course the topics are complicated. They are not as easy as in the past. Nonetheless, I think that all of you have offered a pretty accurate summary of the reading passage and also of the lecture, right? That in this case, as all of you have expressed, talked about, well, Aboriginal people in Australia with a very varied landscape, with a lot of difference in their agrarian environment and with regard to their, let's say, landscape. And that, of course, originated some sort of difference in their culture as well. And the reading passage basically proposes that nowadays it's very difficult to define who is an Aboriginal, right? Who is or who could be described as an Aboriginal person. Now, in the lecture, the professor discusses that, yes, indeed, there are some reasons for thinking that, oh, excuse me, and the reading passage proposes at the end that the only manner to identify yourself, well, excuse me, to demonstrate that you are actually an Aboriginal person from Australia is that the communities that exist in this particular zone accept you and recognize you as part of their communities and people. That is the proposition of the reading passage. Now, when we come to the lecture, the professor doesn't directly, let's say, object that particular thesis, but nonetheless, she says that there is something that actually all different communities in this Aboriginal setting share, and that is their oral tradition. And she argues that through this oral tradition, these Aboriginal people have been permeated of a lot of their morality, of ethics, values, and perceptions about the war. Therefore, she argues that it is through identifying yourself with the oral tradition of this particular Aboriginal communities, you can actually belong or to feel or perceive yourself as belonging these communities, right? Now, of course, she also talks about the dreaming, right? That is, let's say, the compilation of all these traditions and let's say, stories and tales about the origin of this Aboriginal people. And she actually talks about as well how so that these Aboriginal people believe that they have always been in Australia, right? Although, of course, nowadays it's a very accepted theory that most of people emigrated from different parts of the world until reaching Australia. But nonetheless, it says in this, it is said, excuse me, in this dreaming, this compilation of oral tradition, that these Aboriginal people believe they have always been in Australia. That is to say that they have sprung from the earth, they have somehow emanated from the earth. Nonetheless, of course, well, that is tradition. And the second thing it discusses is that it talks about some metaphorical images or figures about the earth basically having these Aboriginal people as their children, and how so that they identify this figure with a mother somehow given birth, and taking, of course, this illustration and applying it to themselves, right, as a community. Quite interesting, right? Quite interesting topic. So what I'm going to do for you, right, dear students, is I want to make sure that I send this in order for you to practice, all right, this topic. Because tomorrow, by the way, all the classes is going to be dedicated for us to practice this specific topic, right? We're going to have an entire hour for you to practice this, so you don't have a lot of preparation. Now, before we go, I just wanted to offer you the following that I think is going to be very, very much useful. Let me see if I have not sent it to you, because if I have, there's no need to do it again, but I think I have not. Writing section. Oh, this is not your, sorry. I had here very interesting material. No, so let me share it with you. Just let me stop this for a while. I have a very, very good material that I know that you are going to appreciate very much. Where are we? Where's this? Where's this? Where's this? This is 09. If you have any question, please feel free to say it until I look for this material that is very important. Questions here, students? Anything that I could clarify here? Eight. Yeah, here it is. Just send it now. No. Where is it? Oh, here it is. Okay, so I'm gonna send it. And verses 19, I think. Yes. Okay, so if you look at your WhatsApp group right now, you're going to discover that I have just sent a very, very important material that you're going to enjoy. I'm gonna share my screen again. So this is a website, but if you get into it, you're gonna notice that it's basically it's I don't know how to describe it. I would say it's an independent website that contains a lot of scientific articles. Why am I sending this to you? Because I know that in order for you to improve in your reading of academic English, you're gonna have to read academic topics. So if you get into this website, you're gonna find a lot of academic articles that are just about science, and all of them, as you can see, is basically like browsing into Google. You get into one of them, you read it, and it's completely free. And it actually has wonderful sources, Cornell University, as you can see. So basically, you just read this whenever you have free time, and you're going to improve very much in your reading of academic English, right? So I hope you enjoy this material. As I say, it's free. Get into it, enjoy it. All right? Fantastic. So we're going to stop the class here, dear students. I'm going to take your assistance, so please don't go. And please help me with your responses in the poll that we always fill. You know, they help me a lot, right? So please help me with that, your students. And let me just look for your names. Where are we? Here. 1909. Fantastic. So is here present Ramirez Camila? Hi, Kamala has not here. What about Mayra Alejandra? What about Salguero Fabiana? She was here. She got out. I don't know why. I'm gonna put present. Quiroga Adriana?
I'm here.
Thank you very much, Adriana. What about Zúñiga Sergio?
Present. I'm here.
Thank you very much, Sergio. What about Alondra Lisette? José Miguel Quiroga? Anaí Estefanía?
Here present.
And finally, we have our dear Jorge.
Here present.
Thank you very much, Jorge. There you are. So thank you very much, dear students. I think that it has been a wonderful class. And as I said, tomorrow we're going to practice for this task, and we're going to be super, super occupied by doing so, right? So I see you tomorrow. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. See you later.
Thank you very much, Carlos. See you tomorrow.
See you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.